So I watched The Hurricane today, and it was pretty good. This movie was made in 1999, it has Denzel Washington, and I was really into it. In this movie, we follow Reuben Hurricane Carter, who was a boxer in the 60s who was falsely accused of murder. And I thought that the movie did a really good job with showing just how difficult it was to be black in the 60s. The segregation was made very clear, and I was really into it. We go through his life in the movie, and we see him as a kid, and how he was almost killed, and he stabbed him, and he stabbed the person trying to kill him in self-defense, and how just ever since, pretty much just because he was black, the cops were after him. He goes to some sort of prison-type place for a while, but they weren't technically allowed to arrest him. But then pretty much right as he turns 21, he gets arrested again and spends around 2 years in prison just for stabbing a white man in self-defense, which really shows how terrible segregation was in the 60s. But while he was in jail, he just lifted and he worked out a ton, and he became this really, really powerhouse, like this big powerhouse of a boxer. And he was very successful. He was like 19-3 or something. At the prime of his career, Reuben Hurricane Carter is wrongfully accused of murder. He tries everything to get out of it, but due to the racism of the system in the 1960s, he just had no chance. And he is sentenced to a whole lifetime in prison. And the whole movie, or at least most of the movie, is about this journey. About what do you do when you're sentenced to a lifetime in prison? Do you give up hope? Do you hope that justice prevails eventually? Because if you live your life with that hope, you most likely will be let down, especially with a system that is so stacked against you. And it's all about how he deals with that. And the whole movie is just watching him just try everything to not get his hopes too high or his hopes too low, and struggle with what do you do with a lifetime sentence for a crime that you didn't commit. And so what we see, the movie is kind of split up into two halves, where the first half is all about his journey, and then the second half is about this guy Lesra's journey of finding out his story and getting him and his people who took him in to try and free Reuben. And we get to go on their whole journey of how, even though they also know that it's stacked against them, they keep fighting because they know they have a good cause here. We watched Lesra and the people who took him in the second half of the movie, just going through the case again, trying to find evidence, doing what they can to see if they can find anything to prove Reuben's innocence. And they find all these little things that are able to add up. And one complaint I do have about the movie is I was super into the story in the first half about Reuben and his fight against segregation in the 60s and how he essentially lost that fight. And then in the second half, he really just gets sidelined as the whole Lesra team is fighting for him. But then it all comes together at the end when Lesra and his team are able to save him. And they're able to prove his innocence up in the Supreme Court. And I guess it's supposedly just this amazing moment in American history where justice prevailed. And I think the movie captured that really well. Overall, I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. I thought it was super solid. I thought the acting was great, especially by Denzel Washington. I hope everyone enjoyed this review, and please think about subscribing.